Iron Man 2, directed by Jon Favreau, starring Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, Don Cheadle, Scarlett Johansson, Sam Rockwell, Mickey Rourke, and Samuel L. Jackson. It's a follow-up to the original smash hit Iron Man. This film, while not as universally loved as the first one, has been, I think, a decent sequel. The reception that the film got at the time of its release was kind of mixed. As I recall, the critics loved it way less than the general audiences. And there's actually a very good reason for that. As a film, in terms of the narrative structure, you have to admit that the movie is kind of all over the place. On the one hand, Stark has his internal problems, being poisoned by the very thing that makes him Iron Man, and he's trying to race time to find a cure. All the while also dealing with the expectations that being Iron Man puts on him and his evolving relationship with Pepper Potts. Secondly, as in all superhero movies, there is a villain, there's an external threat. In this case, there's actually two. Ivan Vanko, known as Whiplash, and Justin Hammer, a competitor of Stark trying to get government contracts for armaments. Tony fending them both off is another major plotline. Then there's also Rhodey becoming a more prominent character, eventually donning a suit of armor as well and becoming War Machine. And on top of that, we have the S.H.I.E.L.D. subplot. Nick Fury shows up for a while, Black Widow is introduced as an important character, and Agent Coulson returns only to quickly disappear from the story altogether, just in order to tease the next film in the series, Thor. So that's a lot of stuff packed into one single film, and I think there are issues in terms of overall cohesiveness. There's not really a sense of great pacing, a sense of focus, of this natural flow to the film that I think it would have had it been more streamlined. We jump from one plotline to another, and I kind of feel like most of them are not properly fleshed out. So objectively speaking, looking at the narrative, I really do believe there are some significant flaws in here. However, even despite all of that, the film still manages to be rather entertaining, thanks to the mix of action and humor that we've already seen in the first one, but also, perhaps primarily, the pure charisma of the characters involved. Pretty much all of the main cast are really enjoyable in their roles, and basically what ends up happening is the performances and the dynamics between the characters end up carrying the film somewhat. Robert Downey Jr. is brilliant as always. Mickey Rourke and Sam Rockwell really chew the scenery and make it properly campy. Samuel Jackson is Samuel Jackson, which is only good. And even though Scarlett Johansson is mostly relegated to being a glorified eye candy, she still has enough charisma to be interesting within the limits, the constraints that the script puts on her. And also, I have to say, the film works better when you look at it from the perspective of the years. Back then, we still evaluated the MCU movies as standalones, but now I think they've evolved so that we look at the whole universe as a sort of movie version of a TV show. It's extended storytelling. And within that framework, Iron Man 2 is pretty good at continuing the story of Tony Stark going forward, but also expanding the universe to the sides, showing that, hey, this is happening. You know, we've got Black Widow, we have S.H.I.E.L.D., we have War Machine, Thor is coming, Avengers are going to be a thing. As this middle chapter of a grander story, I think it's easier to forgive the film the flaws that it has. And as I said, even with them, it's still a perfectly decent action flick.